This is Sue. I'm the library director here, and we have Barbara for More Than You Can See. She's the author, and she's going to introduce herself more fully. And we are recording this for later viewing. And go ahead and take it away, Barbara.
Hi. More Than You Can See, a mother's memoir. This is my first and only book at this point in time. And I appreciate, the invite from Springfield Library System in Vermont having me as a guest. This is really special. So I think I'll start with, this story is about my 17-year-old daughter who is in an automobile accident and sustains a traumatic brain injury. As a result, she has, after she comes out of a coma, she has to relearn basic life skills. And as we work with her through rehab, we discover she has one very profound disability, and that is the lack of language. She can't understand what we're saying, and she can't express in words what's on her mind. So how do you teach somebody to do basic things when they don't understand you? So this led to a unique story, unlike any other survivor story I had read. But that wasn't the only reason that I wrote this book. The heart of the story is centered on my daughter's name was Jenn, centers on her and the relationship she has with her caregivers. And because she has no language, everything is pretty unique and has to be done in a different way. Can't use the standards of how you would teach somebody to eat because she doesn't understand. And not only that, she's very resistant to those kind of things. So, why is this important? Still, I mean, okay, that sounds great. She has, great interactions with the community and with her caregivers, and she learns these things. But why is that important to everybody? Well, there is an estimated 1.5 million people in the United States every year who sustain a traumatic brain injury. Some recover fully, some don't make it, and many end up with disabilities. In fact, there's an estimated 5.5 million US citizens today that are living with permanent disabilities, severe permanent disabilities, as a result of a traumatic brain injury. So they're in our schools, they're in our workplaces, our families, our communities. And these are only the ones that we know about. There are many people who have a head injury that don't get a diagnosis for it. Something happens, they fall, they're in an accident, a sporting event, and they know something's wrong. They go to the doctor, scans are done, and nothing shows up. And they know, hey, I have trouble doing my job since I've had that accident. I have trouble with relationships since that accident. But, not only do they have frustration, but many times they lack getting the medical help they need, and they lack getting the benefits that they need, in the way of insurance, etc. So it's important to me to get the story out so people in the community and elsewhere really have a little bit more understanding about traumatic brain injury, what's involved, both for the survivor and for the family, and really for the community even. And, this was the reason I wrote the book. Some authors write memoirs as a means of healing. I wrote it to help other people. I felt that the need to have them know what my family's journey looked like, and maybe that would help them on their journey, or help them to have more empathy and tolerance to people that they know who have gone through this type of thing. So, we know a lot about, what news feeds we get regarding soldiers who have, traumatic brain injuries as a raw, when they have explosions they're exposed to, never mind being shot in the head or whatever. We hear about that. We know about football players. They've been in the news a lot with, the injuries that they sustain over a career at football. And then too many of them ended up dying at a young age. And when they do an autopsy, they find they've had severe brain damage as a result of all the injuries they incurred over their career. And, this led to them having odd behaviors, sometimes becoming violent, the whole gamut. But, other than those two incidences, and maybe, we also understand aging or, Alzheimer's, dementia, loss of brain function, but just, a brain injury and what that entails, for a lot of families is different than maybe what we hear on the news feed. And it's certainly different than what is scripted in Hollywood, where, you have an injury and maybe you have amnesia for a while, and then you wake up and you put your life back together, and it makes for a lot of funny incidences that happen. But that's not the way it really goes. And so my book was written to help others who are facing these kind of issues, or for people who know somebody. And if that, isn't enough, I think that, just as a good read to understand somebody else's daily life, what they went through, I think it's a good story, and one I felt was important to tell. So that's my spiel. Sue, if you would like to come in and, ask any questions or anything that you would like me to address.
Sure. If you can give some background at what happened to your daughter, that might help us to better understand what the situation was.
Right. Jenn was 17 years old. Like I said, she was in this car accident. Initially, she was in a coma and, very close to death. I had never seen anybody with this, in an ICU in, this kind of situation. So, this is every parent's worst nightmare. After she came out of the coma, we had to send her to an acute rehab because she had to relearn how to eat, how to sit, how to walk, and we had hoped talk, but that didn't happen. But it was like Jenn had woken up on an alien planet, because she didn't really understand anything around her. She did, after working with professionals, she did learn how to eat, but she didn't recognize what was edible. Much like, a little year and a half old, how they put everything in their mouth and they try it. And that's what she did. She didn't, understand things like not stepping out into the street. Cars would hit you. She didn't know about curbs. She didn't understand poisons or hot stoves or any of those issues that really small toddlers have to learn as they get acquainted with their world. And that's what Jenn had to go through. I think people are used to seeing, when somebody has an injury like a stroke, that they do have to learn how to rewalk, right? They're used to that. But there's more to it. And because her injury was also frontal lobe, she lacked a lot of appropriateness. And that makes for some interesting little tidbits in the story of quirky things that she did and how her very special caregivers handled those situations, because she could be quite a challenge. She was often very loud. She didn't know how to be around people in public. She might see a piece of lint on their shoulder and go up and pick it off. She might reach into their pocket to see if they had any candy in there. So she kept everybody on their toes as she learned how to navigate her way back into life. And, this is a story of rebuilding a life for my daughter. And, I wouldn't have written it if there hadn't been fun parts. I wouldn't have written a story of just let's cry all the way through this book. I realized that that's too much. And, there are parts you're going to cry, and there's definitely parts that you will laugh.
And it must have been such a stress on your family.
Absolutely. Jenn had a younger sibling, Amy, her sister. And, I can say that, she was a young kid, she was like 13. And this trauma has come to her family. And Amy was incredibly strong and jumped right in and became part of our team of, working with Jenn, watching what the professionals did. And really, when we made decisions involving what we were doing next with Jenn, or where was she going to be placed, Amy was part of our team. And, that really held our family together. So it's often something like this that rips a family apart. But in our case, we were extremely fortunate. We had a strong bond, a lot of love in our family before the accident happened. And, that bond held strong through all the drama and trauma that went on.
And how long has it been since the accident now?
The accident happened in 91. So
Okay.
this is a while ago. This is
Mhm.
30 years ago.
Okay. And is she communicating yet?
Well, people have to read the book to find that out.
Ah, okay. I gotcha. So we're going to invite any of the participants to unmute themselves to ask questions if you'd like. Muting. Or you can put it in the chat. Oh, Suzanne.
Well, we don't have a question, but Scott, Suzanne, Diana, and Donovan are all just here. We want to say hi to Barb, the beautiful author.
Uh-huh. Anyone else have questions?
I have to give a a little spoiler alert here. I think these are some people from my book that have logged on, because I did tell them that, this Zoom was available.
Mhm.
So I think we have some of the actual characters there.
Oh, okay.
So I think their questions have been answered from the get-go.
Mhm, mhm.
But maybe let me talk just a little bit about my writing process.
Okay.
And I didn't view myself as an author. Uh, my husband Mark was the one who really kept a journal during Jenn's recovery process, and I did use that when I began writing. But because the story was important, I knew I needed to tell it. But it was after a lot of years of healing. I couldn't have written it initially. And, he questioned me, did I really want to revisit all these painful memories of the past, like especially when Jenn's accident first happened. And, it was a valid question, and I had to really think about it. And I know that there are a few people who have told me they're looking to write their story from having had sort of, they're survivors. And I think that's great. I will say it's not an easy process. I had a lot to learn. I was really totally unaware of how this whole industry worked. And I enjoyed learning all the different aspects of it. It was different than I could have ever imagined. But, if their story is one that they really want to get behind and tell to others, I say, great, it's not easy. So do it if you enjoy it. Do it if you're having fun. Because there are many, many, many books out there, and it's really hard to get published. It's really hard to sell books. It's really hard to be recognized. And if you're not having fun, you're going to become very frustrated with the process. But it can be extremely rewarding when all those things come together, as they have for me. And you start hearing what readers get from your book, and hearing those kind of comments. I've done many book clubs and events, and when readers share with me their reflections and their takeaways from the story, that is the reward. It's not the number of sales or the number of dollars. It's how readers reflect on your story. And, I can say I've been amply rewarded.
So we've had another participant ad come in, so anyone can unmute themselves and ask Barbara questions. Did you have a support group besides family?
We lived away from most of our family, so we didn't really have family. But neighbors and friends were terrific, initially, through the whole thing. But as years go on, you find support in other places. When Jenn went to the first rehab center, the facility had an awesome support system for the families. They brought us together every weekend and had a luncheon with guest speakers that talked about what we were going through, what we could expect, what is a traumatic brain injury, yada, 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 giving us information because all of us needed more information. And I really understand the importance of support groups after having gone through a tragedy and having those people that were going through the same thing I was. People, our family and our community were wonderful, but they didn't understand everything. And so I really appreciate support groups. And we had that like for the first year and a half. Then Jenn was moved to a group home facility. And that was different. It wasn't like all the families coming together on the weekends to be at this facility. It was a different setting. But here we developed relationships with the people who actually worked with Jenn and took care of her. And they're amazing, wonderful people. And they ended up being our support group, actually ended up being like our extended family.
Mhm. People.
What?
I'm still waiting for questions from other people.
Okay.
Give them a minute. So where are you located, Barbara, again? Where do you live?
Well, right now I live in Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania, a little ways away from you. The story takes place, the accident and where we lived at the time of the accident was New York State, the Hudson Valley. The first facility that Jenn went to was an hour away from our home. It was in Pennsylvania at that time. And then much of the story happens then in Connecticut, in the Brookfield, Danbury area of Connecticut. That was where the next facility was located. And so we were kind of in a variety of places.
Okay. All right. Anything else we should know before we wrap up, or anyone else have questions?
I'll just add at this point that I've done many book clubs, and I do have book club questions that are available on request from my website. I can say that the discussions that have happened in these book clubs has been really, really rich and open, and people share some really touching stories of how they've been affected by somebody having a brain injury or somebody who has a disability that's in their family. And they say it's kind of a time that they can open up in a situation where they typically don't. Many of them said, I haven't shared this with anybody in my community. And I think having somebody there tell their story, more than you can see, it's like, okay, this is kind of an open forum for me to get some of this out of what I'm experiencing. So I just like to add that, again, book clubs are a great way to discuss the story. And there's, many little things that you can debate about it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Barbara, for attending this way. And we are going to be setting up the recording on our YouTube channel. So anyone that missed any of the beginning part, we'll be posting that on our Facebook page so that everybody in Springfield will know about Barbara's book. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sue. And, hopefully your library patrons jump on board and read the story.
All right. Have a very good night.
Okay, you too. Thank you.